Happy birthday, America.
And that's it for us. See you next
week.
we're
Gone,
Bye.
It was kind of a lengthy intro. Once a year, I think. So.
Well, that was a wonderful effort on your part.
Why, thank you so much. Years ago, but
it was inspirational and aspirational, and I could use
if
a
I
couple
can keep getting residuals off of it, then that'll be okay.
Well, you and Barry will work that out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he hasn't caught up with me yet, so
he's safe for now. Hi, I'm Mark.
I'm Tom,
and we are the
Cinemaniacs.
So we've been away.
Yes, we have.
At the request of the state, we were away for a little while. Now we're back with more films that we'll get a chance to talk about.
Probably.
So, would you like? In your honor, would you like to begin?
I'll be happy to start it all up and say that Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin are back fighting those criminal elements down south of us. If they just build the wall, wouldn't that work? I don't think so, because they're going to have to fight the Sicario on the day of the Soldado. How topical.
In many ways, this film was. This is the sequel to Sicario, which starred Emily Blunt, and Benicio del Toro was a side, lower tier character in that film. So this focuses on him on a mission. It's a man on a mission film. You have your Benicio del Toro, you get your Josh Brolin, you get your Catherine Keener, you get your Matthew Modine, and other people you might recognize. And I like this a lot. I like the original Sicario a lot.
Yeah,
there was a moment in Sicario where I thought it was going to turn into an alien movie, and I was like, oh my God, if they do this, they have the biggest cajones in the business, but they didn't. So this, you don't need to see Sicario to enjoy this film at all.
I think so.
I was talking to a friend about this, and he said he'd never seen it. And I'm like, they explain everything you need to know about Del Toro in one sentence. It's not really connected to the other movie directly in any way, which is cool, smart on their part. And it's a gritty, what would you call it? It's not an action movie. It's a gritty, would you call it a political drama, a crime drama?
Yeah, probably more crime drama.
A little of all that stuff.
Not really a thriller, but I mean, it's thrilling, but
it's very intense, and very dark.
Yes.
I mean, not visually, thank God, but in terms of subject matter and the things these people do and how they go about doing it. And Josh Brolin, you sort of open with this character who's I don't know what you'd call him. He's a fixer or something for the government, and he goes in and he gets things done. He starts wars, he stops wars. Basically, the whole idea here is the government wants to get different drug cartels to fight with each other so that we don't have to take care of them. They'll just take each other out. And they go about doing that by kidnapping or orchestrating the kidnapping of the daughter of a drug baron or whatever in Mexico, and things don't quite work out. And Del Toro was brought in to help with that and help clean things up. And it just goes wrong in many ways. And I was totally with this the whole time. It was, I don't know if edge of your seat is the right word, but there's this sense of unease and dread, which the original Sicario had really well. It's really well shot. Everybody in it is really good. It's for grown-ups. It's brutal at times. The subject matter is grim and probably nothing that would interest a kid anyway. But I really, really like this. I hope they set up that there could be another one of these films. I would be happy to follow this character further along. There's a moment we were talking about during the clip that was borderline completely unbelievable. I guess there's a logical reason why and how a character gets through something, but there's somebody in my audience who was like, what? Come on. And I was kind of there too. I'm like, no, how do they explain this? And then they kind of did. Anyway, I thought it was really good. And you?
I was really looking forward to this. I like the original Sicario a lot, as all of the elements that you discuss and describe are there, and I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately for me, there were too many moments that just seemed designed. I mean, I can't necessarily say unbelievable, because in many respects, well, on two hands, the whole scenario seems unbelievable, but then it also seems believable, so that's kind of strange. But just, I felt like they worked too hard to throw 2 or 3 very noticeable twists in there for the dramatic impact of it. I didn't believe one thing that happened to one of our main characters. In my opinion, they don't explain it at all. Maybe they will in the second, but in the third one rather, if they could do the third one, but I'm left with this sense of, that makes absolutely no sense. Whereas all of the rest of it kind of did. Well, not necessarily all of the rest of it. There's a scene where Brolin is taking the little girl for an exchange, supposedly, and we don't know if it's a real exchange or not, but then just out of the blue something happens. I mean, you know it's going to happen, but it's just kind of out of the blue. Oh, whoops, something happens. And I don't want to say exactly what it is, but there were too many of those instances for me. There were also and the original was so unique. And I don't mean to indicate that I didn't like this. I just didn't love it. So Brolin is sent out, as you say, given anything he wants to go and do it. Well, you can see that rug's going to get pulled out from under him eventually, and it does. And they make such a big deal out of it at the time, but I'm like, you could see this coming. So whereas I thought the original Sicario, dark and grim, and in my opinion, a 9 as an intense, whatever kind of a film it is. We haven't come to the right grips to describe it. This one for me is like a 6 or a 7. Still delivers, but not on the par that I wanted it to.
Speaking of delivery.
Yes.
Speaking of binging on films, which we do. This next clip is provided as informational as this. We have not seen this because it opens on Wednesday, but here's a little something that may also be reflective of today's times. It is a film entitled The First Purge.
Begins, so you still have time to add to the fun of watching the movie.
Oh, happy birthday on the wonderful 4th of July week / whatever.
Celebrate our nation's independence with violence and slaughter.
By killing anybody that you can.
Speaking of violence and slaughter, we have a sequel to a long-running film franchise.
Yes.
Featuring top-notch effects and stars. Would you like to tell people?
Well, top-notch stars, I'll say at the very least. Not that I'm leading into anything positive or negative about this one. But Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard are back reprising their roles as action-adventure dinosaur, big lizard trainer, and scientist kind of, who's running a big park where things from millions and millions of years ago are being threatened. There's a natural disaster about to occur, and they have to save all of those creepy crawlies and big punchy things. In Jurassic World, it's a fallen kingdom. Doesn't look good for all of them.
The movie doesn't look good?
Well, no, for all the dinosaurs and anybody kind of caught on the island. But this felt very reminiscent to me to the sequel to King Kong. I mean, we see them initially, and I seem to recall, I don't remember if it must have been on the island, because in the trailer you can see all the dinosaurs are being threatened by the volcano exploding. But the subplot is there's a group that is funding Pratt and Dallas Howard's efforts to save the dinosaurs, but it's really an opportunity for these people to make lots and lots and lots of money by selling the dinosaurs. It turns out that Pratt had been involved. I don't remember all of the sequels, the ones we saw before this. I don't remember well enough to make a big deal about Blue, which is this raptor.
I feel like that was just from the previous movie.
Right. Yeah. And Pratt training Blue, and so he has to go back and find that one. And this felt like a huge mishmash for me. I mean, I guess this is an adventure film if you're not, and this isn't a negative comment, wanting to think a whole lot. I mean, it's the summer, and right. Superhero movies and dinosaur action movies and stuff. I'm not saying you need to go in and have movies that you think about, but I like to not find it totally mind-numbing. And I think your mind has to be completely numbed by the fact that, for me, this is just like scream fest throughout. They get to the island, and from that point on, for me, it's how can we get Bryce Dallas Howard to scream at the top of her lungs, and how often can Chris Pratt evade unbelievably difficult to escape death scenes. I just thought this was too much. Escape believability, if I can believe. And I did believe the original, Crichton's original concept, which I thought was brilliant, about finding DNA and raising that. This has become a monster movie that I didn't think worked really well.
Yeah, the same. It didn't engage me. I never connected with the movie. It starts off pretty strong, where you get the team back together again, and they go back to the island to help save the dinosaurs. And then when you get off the island, everybody is in a jail cell for the rest of the movie.
Yep.
Until the end when they break loose. I'm not trying to give any plot points away, but basically they're all taken to this huge estate, and our leads are all in jail cells, and they have to figure out a way out, and the dinosaurs are all in cages. And then eventually something happens and they break loose for like a minute. It's not much of the movie.
Yep.
Now, constant action is boring. We know this. So you have to have ups and downs and all this other stuff. Just the story didn't interest me that much. This felt to me like, it felt inconsequential. It felt like if you did a comic book series that bridges the gap between the two movies. This happens all the time, and
Right.
I occasionally will experience these things, or webisodes, or online something. They're always totally pointless and inconsequential, and if you love this, it gives you a little bit more. This felt like a connective tissue between the previous Lost World and what they are showing us will be the next Lost World.
Right.
If this makes enough money, there'll be another Lost World.
Oh, sure.
And like the way it ends, I'm like, oh, that's kind of what I thought this movie was going to be. And this middle section, it seemed like it should have been 2 scenes in another movie.
There's this huge subplot where they have to rescue this little girl.
That whole thing,
James Cronin's
James Cromwell's
Cromwell, who's
daughter.
the guy funding it originally, but there are bad people in his organization, and it
It
just
felt like
all-
the only reason the little girl was in it is because you have to have a kid in
More
a Jurassic
peril,
Park
right.
movie, and I don't care. And her story, once the big reveal about this little kid happens, I'm like,
Right.
I couldn't quite get my head around it, and they'd moved on. And I'm like, so what is this? She doesn't need to be here. There's
Right.
no point to this. So yeah, I really didn't care for this that much. It was okay enough while I watched it. It's nothing I ever feel like I need to see again. It's nothing I'd necessarily tell anybody to watch because I really feel like if they make it, the next movie will probably be a heck of a lot better, and this movie will be one of those things where it's just like, oh yeah, they made one in between these two, right?
Right.
That's all we saw in the theater this week.
Yep.
We'd like to thank, who would we like to thank?
Oh, well, we'd like to thank the Colonial Theater. Thank you for being our new sponsors. Hooray.
Here in lovely Keene, New Hampshire.
Yes.
A beautiful 1920s or early 20s, I
say
believe,
something like
theater.
that.
So it's a single screen movie palace that shows art house.
One of
and
the things,
events.
and I mentioned this because they also sponsor my Friday show on the radio. And one of the things that I'd said was, well, we've had various sponsors, the Latches Theater and Keene Cinemas, and those are like 6-plexes, 5 and 6-plexes, and so you can see a lot more. There's a little bit more variety. What I mentioned was, believe it or not, based on the past couple of weeks, you may not believe this, but I try to find something good to say about movies. Even if I really disliked them, I'll say, well, this was okay, that was okay. One of the nice things, perhaps one of the drawbacks to the Colonial is they only have one screen. One of the advantages to that is I think they're very careful about what they get.
Yes.
Everything is usually really high tier, and I can't think of the last time that they screened a movie. Well, I can. It was Manchester by the Sea. Sorry.
That's what I was going to say. too.
Really didn't like Manchester by the Sea. But other than that, it's been a decade that they haven't shown something that's been really, really classy. So that's going to be one of the nice things, I
And
think.
this week, Tully, we
This
believe?
week is Tully, yes.
This week is Tully, which, did you see Tully?
Yes, I saw that. And again, one of the things that Colonial may not be the absolute first run, but they'll get stuff, and after it's been talked about, they'll be able to bring it back. So you have a second opportunity to see some things. I saw it originally in the theater. Charlize Theron, who has some issues with a nanny that
Yes.
is gifted to her to take care of her newborn.
We don't have a clip. This isn't a proper review, but I thought Tully was really good.
Yeah.
So I would say if you are local and you can get to the Colonial, Tully is worth your time, especially if you're a female type person, especially if you're a female type person 30s or older, especially if
new
you're a
baby?
female type person with a baby. I think it's going to speak some
Who
truths
has a new
to
nanny
you.
that's causing problems for you? We're getting a little
Exactly.
specific, but
This movie was made for you.
targeted.
Helen.
Right there.
So now we move on to that which you can view with your own eyeballs or perhaps a friend's in the home video platform format, service, or media of your choice. First up, ooh, it's me. Hey, how are you? Here comes the latest film from Tyler Perry involving people and emotions and relationships and a darkness simmering under the surface that comes to a full boil in Tyler Perry's Acrimony.
Old Milwaukee tastes as great as its name.
It's all you.
It's all me.
all
Okay.
you.
Yeah, I saw this in the theaters. I'll admit to the Medea movies being guilty pleasures of mine. They're stupid and intentionally stupid, and I think everybody who's in them knows it. But they just look like they have so much fun, and Perry seems to be having so much fun playing 800 different characters. I'm not reviewing the Medea movies right now, but they get a little insipid toward the end because there's always, and I hate to say this, there's always a moral, but sometimes it's ham-fisted moral. This is quite on the opposite side of things. This is Perry as director and screenwriter. dealing with the infidelity and this woman who puts up with her husband's cheating on her constantly until at one point she just decides she's had it and she goes out and performances are just terrific. This is really well scripted, really well directed. I think in all honesty, we've seen Perry as an actor in several other things. I think he's just multifaceted. He's a wonderful actor outside of the Medea garb even. But for me, this really showed me that he's a conscientious, intelligent director and writes good scripts. I thought that Acrimony was really quite solid.
Did it have a very sort of dark subject matter?
Well, the important thing whenever you're watching any movie, as we're trailing onto this, is you do need to see them without a whole lot of light, which is exactly what happens when you're a musician who happens to be blind and you think that a murder has been committed in London or wherever else you may be, but she just happens to be in London. Trouble is she has to track down on the seedier side of the London Boweries and things, trying to find the killer completely in darkness.
They've left their fields and barns. They're marching from the farms because kids don't drink enough milk.
So this kind of came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't expecting. For some reason, when I first saw it, I saw this in theaters. When I first saw it, I didn't know it was set in London. And for some reason, that threw me a little bit at the very beginning. I don't know why. I just guess I kind of thought. I went in expecting there was a TV show from, I think, the 70s, probably before your time, called Wait Until Dark.
That was a movie, though, Audrey Hepburn.
Yes, with Audrey Hepburn.
Based on a play.
Right, and so, and where she's blind,
Yeah.
and these two guys, I haven't seen it since it was originally
Alan Arkin
aired.
is one of the bad guys.
Yeah, it was one of the bad guys, very good. And so they break into her place, and it's all about her being blind. This was very similar. I was hoping for, I still like this. I thought this was
It looks really good.
Smart, well shot. Her performance is really solid. I was hoping for, similar to, if you remember, a movie that I think both of us really liked called A Quiet Place.
Oh, God, yeah.
More recently, where sound design was so phenomenally important. I was hoping that was going to be similar to that. Obviously, these were made so nearly concurrently that I don't think A Quiet Place could have influenced this or vice versa. So I don't think they were aware of that. I was looking forward to, and this is probably just me as a filmmaker and a film analyst and that kind of thing, wanting more attention to putting us in her head and her ears about how she uses sound, because my understanding is that blind people eventually heighten their other senses. It's not like Daredevil or anything like that, but that they become really excellent listeners. And I was looking for a little bit more of that, but I still thought In Darkness was a smart, really intelligent, well-acted thriller. Thought it worked pretty well.
Well, it's funny that you bring up giant robots.
Indeed.
Because the next film we have, yeah, I wasn't paying attention. I thought you said something about giant robots. The next film is the sequel to a Guillermo del Toro directed feature about people who climb into giant robots and kick the tuchuses of giant monsters. This film is entitled Pacific Rim Uprising.
Headaches. Pain mounts up. You feel dull, depressed. Tension puts nerves on edge.
So at one point, Roger Corman was asked, why did you stop making B movies? And he said, because the majors started making them and they took them
Yes,
away from us.
right, exactly.
And that's what this is.
Big budget B movie.
This is people who grew up like me watching Creature Double Feature and Godzilla movies, getting the keys to the kingdom and saying, I want to make giant robots fighting giant monster movies, and we're going to give you all the money in the world to do that.
Well, and how many different iterations of that do we need?
Well, I would love them as long as they're fun. I didn't like the previous Pacific Rim because predominantly you couldn't see what was going on in the movie. It was really, it was all taking place at night, underwater, in the rain, and like in the dark metal fighting dark
preparing
skin.
for The Shape of Water.
Yeah, well, Shape of Water I thought was great.
Yes. But
So this is brightly lit.
Yes.
And I liked that about this movie. I could see what was happening. So I was okay with this movie. Honestly, I remember almost nothing about it. I saw it in the theater.
I'll agree.
I remember it being a decent, fun, throwaway Saturday matinee, which is how I saw it. And that's how mentally I see these films. It's what they should be. I can't get behind these Transformers movies and stuff that are so heavy-handed and serious. They're movies about toys. They should just be fun. Even though a lot of the original Godzilla films had pretty heavy themes woven throughout, they were still fun. other than the first movie, which is pretty serious. So anyway, this, what to say about it? If you love the original, some people who like the original thought this was a step down. I didn't really care for the original, so for me, this was a fun throwaway movie. Honestly, if I want to watch giant monster movies, I'm going to step back 30 years in my personal taste, so I'm not going to watch this kind of thing anyway. Effects I thought were pretty darn good for what they are. And it's just silly sci-fi action, basically.
Right, that's about all I could take away from this, was that the effects were certainly pretty high caliber. I don't get into the Transformer type of movies, so we get to crawl in and control these things, so what? I don't remember a lot about this. This built off the original. We have some returning characters who have issues and vendettas they have to go on, and I didn't remember them, and I didn't really care a whole lot. So this was, as you say, chuck your mind at the door, and if you just want to see some slam bam action, I think to see this on video requires a big screen. I don't think this is going to play well on our little 30-inch computer monitor or anything, unless you're like right up and nice and close to it. So again, yeah, I think for me, what I took away from this was good effects. Other than that, for me, not a lot of story, and well, wait a minute. What about where's Optimus Prime and everything? That's all I kept thinking. Sorry.
And John Boyega from the new Star Wars films is in this, and he plays the son.
He's in everything, so.
Yeah, he's because they couldn't get Idris Elba, they play the son, and Idris Elba's character is deceased in this film.
Okay.
Speaking of deceased.
Idris Elba was off fighting evil through the Dark Tower,
yeah.
I guess. Yeah, speaking of deceased, what are you going to do when you're running a Soviet dictatorship and the dictator dies? It's pretty tough, and we get a behind-the-scenes, not quite serious look at what happens when everybody who's running Russia and the Soviet Union has to deal with the death of Stalin.
Protein you require from wieners made by Oscar Mayer.
So I didn't get a chance to see this in theaters, but everybody and his brother was telling me how funny it was, and I just thought it looked kind of odd. But I love Buscemi. I like timbre. I screened this for my wife after having seen it and falling in love with it. I just really loved this movie. Very, very funny. Very, very clever. Sometimes laugh out loud, slap your knee funny, in my opinion. My wife had difficulty getting over the fact that all of these Soviets speak with British accents. So I could kind of see that.
Claudius, all the Romans speak with British accents.
That's true.
Too, so.
That's true. So if you can get past that, I forget. I think this was in theaters last year, and so I hadn't seen it by the time. Although we didn't do a best of worst of, this would certainly be near the top. Probably top 5 of my favorite films of last year. I just thought it was really, really clever, just smart, moves fast. I thought The Death of Stalin was a terrific film.
And in this film, Stalin suffers from an incurable disease.
He does, unfortunately, death.
And speaking of incurable diseases, Bella Thorne.
Death remains this nation's #1 killer.
It does, and it's so far that condition is irreversible. Unless you deal with zombies.
That's true.
Bella Thorne stars as a girl with an incurable disease that prevents her from going out into the golden showery rays that we are currently sheltering ourselves from here in this dank basement. She stars in a film entitled The Midnight Sun.
Beautiful idea.
New hidden magic with conditioners. The first rich hairspray.
Oh, and we're back.
So this is a tug at your heartstrings romantic drama.
Yes.
I wouldn't call it really romantic comedy. And as we said, the deal is that Bella Thorne is this girl who has this condition where if she goes out into the sunlight, she gets severe burns, and basically it'll kill her. So she can only come out at night. I was waiting for the twist that she was a vampire.
Yep.
But we never got that. Maybe a fan edit will rectify that for us. And Patrick Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
Yes, of course he's related. Nobody else has that last name in this country who's not related to him.
Right. They'd probably get sued if they did.
He plays the boyfriend, and the whole struggle, as you see again in the trailer. But for our YouTube viewers who won't be seeing the trailer in this show, the deal is she doesn't tell him. She withholds from this boy she's falling for that she has this condition. She just says she has to work and she gets off at night.
And you've got to do that for the drama of the movie.
Exactly.
But that's what made no sense.
And the big struggle is. She doesn't tell him for a long time, and then she does tell him, and oh no, well, what's going to happen by when she finally reveals this to him? And watching the trailers, I'm going to be like, if it's her and she tells you that, you're going to be like, okay, we'll make this work.
Yeah, really? Well, okay.
Anyway, she plays a really nice, sweet character. It's nice to see movies filled with characters that you don't hate, which is unusual in most films these days, especially ones about youths. She's a songstress in the film, and she is a songstress in real life, so you get to hear her sing a little bit. I thought it was, you were saying off air, it was reminiscent of The Fault in Our Stars.
Right.
Maybe a little bit less aggressively weepy throughout than that one was, but bring Kleenex.
Yeah, I didn't feel as manipulated quite so much. Not that that's a negative necessarily in Fault in Our Stars, because I think you go to those kinds of movies for that kind of cathartic, emotional release and effect. Yeah, I thought this was a little easier on my sensibilities. She, as you say, was very good. I didn't think Schwarzenegger was bad by any means. I think, not that I'm expecting him to be bad, but, you know, dramatic actor and Schwarzenegger don't quite go together. We'll have to see. Although I think Arnold's been in a couple of recent movies where I think there was one where he was a sheriff of a Texas town.
Collateral Damage?
Yeah, I liked it. I don't think it was Collateral. I don't remember what
I thought
it was.
Aftermath was pretty good. That was him
Yeah, I think it was
acting.
maybe Aftermath, yeah. So anyway, has a chance. But I'll turn the rest of the movie over to my comrade at arms.
I'm no commie. Hi. So up now we have a documentary released recently from Film Rise about the troubled relationship of jazz legend Lee Morgan and the woman who would be his lady and or wife. This film documentary is entitled I Called Him Morgan.
That leaves you with a nice, warm glow.
So I don't care about jazz.
Right, nor do I.
I don't really enjoy it that much. It's background for me, maybe. So going into a documentary about a jazz musician I've never heard of, I thought, ooh, this might not be of much interest to me. But this movie paints such a vivid and exciting portrait of the era this takes place in, like, you know, early, mid-50s, I believe, that I was totally into it. I'm like, this looks like a really cool place to be. And you have all these people who are bandmates of his and friends of his from that time. So you could see pictures of them back then. You hear the music. And the music is a jazz of a sort that's very pleasant to listen to.
Right.
It's not the
Soft
more
jazz.
esoteric stuff. So you get the history of this guy who is this young, like, successful jazz musician who meets up with this woman, and they have what becomes a tumultuous relationship, and it ultimately ends in her. This isn't a give. This is beginning of the movie. You hear this. She shoots him, and so it's like, what? How did they go from being inseparable and in love to her killing him, I believe, on stage in a jazz club in New York?
Really?
So it's a fascinating story. Everybody in it is interesting. There's a lot of fun, positive stories about this guy, Lee Morgan, who I didn't know who he was. So I would think if you're a jazz fan, this is probably very, very interesting. But me, who doesn't care about jazz at all, I was like riveted by this thing and found it really well made, really entertaining.
I'm wondering if these days if Tyler Perry then is a
jazz
fan.
Acrimony would be a
Sounds like
great follow-up
right to
thematically.
Acrimony.
So this is out now via Film Rise and is quite good. Also out now is a film that is so far away from what we were just talking about.
It looks like it.
So, if you ever wanted to watch a film about the thrilling battles between warring telecom communities to bring wireless service to a section of Africa that has been underserved, and if you wanted that story wrapped in an action movie trapping made by
already did
people
that?
in Hong Kong,
Damn, that was my script.
his script has been done. And if you wanted that film to star both Mike Tyson and Steven Seagal, boy, cousin Jonathan, you have just got the film you've been looking for, entitled The China Salesman.
Mommy, look Vigil! Jimmy, please, not now. I'm too busy.
Okay.
Okay,
So
it's
let
about
me
all I
give
can
you,
say.
let me give you a little information. This is what you want to watch with a bunch of friends to laugh at.
If they're thoroughly drunk off their ass.
This is a competently made film. The problem is Mike Tyson is not an actor. And he's playing some African tribesman who's trying to do these terroristic deals and things for his people. And he occasionally lapses in and out of an accent, occasionally. And when it's an action scene, there is a fight between him and Steven Seagal. And shockingly, it's like up front in the movie. It is so haphazardly shot because Seagal is portly and he still does his slappy stuff, but it's so over edited you barely can see anything. And Tyson is doing the fisticuffs, and it is so manipulated through editing and CGI and all kinds of stuff to put these guys fighting each other. They really were there in the same space, but it's ridiculous and silly and awful, and I was laughing out loud by myself watching this. The main characters are Asian characters who are trying to get this telecom deal, and this peripheral action stuff, it doesn't make a lot of sense as to why. The action is predominantly a lot of gunplay, a lot of explosions. It's like tanks and military
So is
type
this one
stuff.
of those Asian films that's budgeted for that, and then they just get a couple of American stars?
I think so, to make
try
it
to stick
international.
onto it?
And part of the big problem with this film, too,
Wow.
is that it was an international cast, but most people spoke English on set.
Okay.
For most people, English is not their first language, or they hired people, which often happens in Hong Kong movies, they hired people who could speak English, figuring, well, our audience doesn't speak it, so they're going to hear what they know is somebody speaking
Right.
English, but they'll be reading subtitles, or it'll be dubbed or whatever. So the people conveying the English dialogues are not actors, or are bad actors, or it's like, here, I just wrote this, do a cold reading on camera, and we'll print that one. So this movie is terrible, but at the same time, very entertaining, because it's awful. So if you want to see a really awful movie with Mike Tyson not acting and Seagal barely in it, and moments where two actors are speaking in Chinese, and then you cut to Seagal, who you didn't know was in the room, and he's like, how about we speak English? And then they continue the scene in English.
Oh my God, really?
It was, oh boy, howdy. So
Wow.
China Salesman is out now for your, and I do mean entertainment. Okay, up next, probably this will be the last one. It is the Arrow Video Corner.
no.
As you can see here, Tom will gurgle his
Ah.
lines for that.
Oh, got it.
We will do the first of two. We'll see if we get to the second one. I doubt it. Here we have a film from New Zealand. It is an odd type of tale about a young girl and her mother and her grandfather on a farm in a remote area of New Zealand, and it is entitled Vigil.
Because they taste delicious and give you vitamins and protein too.
So,
Okay.
this is part of this is an Arrow Academy release, so it's more an art house foreign film than it is the crazy wacky stuff that Arrow has sort of become known for amongst aficionados. And it's a New Zealand film from the early '80s, and it is about. It's hard to say. It's about these
You can
three
tell me,
characters.
I'm your
Well, I'm watching this
co-host.
and I'm like, is this a post-apocalyptic movie? Is
Right.
this another planet? I mean,
Okay.
it's a remote. You barely see any of the world around this little farm that is nestled in amongst these rocky hillsides. And early in the film, it's this little girl who I thought was a boy because she has short hair and it's that age where it could go either way.
Right.
And I guess ostensibly it is about the awakening of this young girl as adolescence comes on. Her father dies, and this guy who was seen in the distance when the father dies shows up at the farm with the little girl, her mother, and her grandfather to sort of be taken on as a hired hand or as a replacement for the father. And it turns out she doesn't like this guy, and the guy's kind of rough around the edges, and he does something borderline untoward at one point, and he starts to make the moves on the mother, but the mother might not like him. It was really unclear to me.
What's Vigil got to do with it?
Vigil, it's a nice
Good
enigmatic
question.
title for a film.
Okay,
I'm not sure. Maybe that she was holding a vigil in her heart for her father to come back, and
Okay.
maybe that this guy would replace her father, but it's kind of becomes clear as the film goes on that he really is not that good a person. But it's very, very sparse dialogue, minimal sparse dialogue. A lot of the scenes just kind of flow and
Right.
meander and what have you. So I didn't really like it. It is undeniably atmospheric. The place where they shot it is just this wasteland, which New Zealand is good for, as Peter Jackson has shown us.
Yes.
So it's a rough, rugged wasteland that again made me wonder if this is supposed to be post-nuclear war or something. You don't really hear from the outside world. There's like 4 people in the whole movie. And,
Wow.
and
Okay.
so it was really hard to get my head around this film. I didn't like it. There are people who like it a lot. As with all the Arrow releases, it has commentaries and a vintage on-set making of and retrospectives and critical appreciations and the trailer, and it's loaded with all kinds of context. If you like the movie, you'll find out all about it. If you're like me and you're coming to this movie as a stranger, much like The Man on the Hill, it will clue you in as to how it was received, how it was made, and what people think of it now.
Okay.
And it is out now via Arrow. We don't have time to talk about anything else, so we'll just carry that over till next week. We'll be talking about Ant-Man and Wasp, The First Purge,
Yep.
and whatever else we can cram into this fine program. Until then, I'm Mark.
I'm Tom, and have a wonderful 4th of July,
Yes,
everybody
indeed.
watching, and you and Rick and everybody who's running our control booth. They will get credit coming up momentarily.
And we are...
Cinemaniacs. Yeah, I don't know what